really it was not made by God. Why? Because God and suffering are contradictory in nature. A ca if born of a cow is still a cow. If creatures are created by God, they should be similar to God, for they are his sons. Comment literally means self-existing heaven. It refers to Svara, the title of Shiva, the king of the Devas or gods. Here Nagarjuna uses the self-existing heaven of Isvara to examine the concept of God and to show that God cannot be used to explain the origin, duration and destruction of the universe. Again, if God created all living beings, he would not give them suffering. Therefore one should not say that God created suffering. Question: all living beings are created by God, and suffering and happiness are also given by God. But they do not know the cause of happiness, and hence God gives them suffering.
Answer: if all living beings are the sons of God, he should use happiness to cover suffering and should not give them suffering. And those who worship him should not have suffering but should enjoy happiness. But this is not true in reality. They act by themselves and have happiness and suffering, and receive rewards according to the principle of causal conditions. All these are not made by God. Comment: Nagarjuna has presented the problem of evil to question whether God is all good. In the next paragraphs, he questions whether God is self-sufficient, self-caused and omnipotent, and touches on predestination. Again, if God is self-existent, he should need nothing. If he needs something, he should not be called self-existent. If he does not need anything, why did he cause change, like a small boy who plays a game, to make all creatures? Again, if God created all living beings, who created him? That God created himself cannot be true, for nothing can create itself. If he were created by another creator, he would not be self-existent.
Again, if God is the omnipotent creator, there should be no obstacle to the process of his creation. He could make everything in just one instant. But the scripture about God says, God wanted to create all creatures. He practiced various ascetic deeds and then created all creeping insects. Again he practiced ascetic deeds and then created all flying birds. Again he practiced ascetic deeds and created men and devas. If it were a result of the practice of ascetic deeds that creeping insects were first produced, and then flying birds, then men and devas, we should know that living beings were produced from karmas of causal conditions, not from God who practiced ascetic deeds. Again, if God is the creator of all creatures, where did he create them? Was the place where he performed creation created by him? Was it created by another? If it was created by God, then where did he create it? If he stayed in another place to create this place, then who created the other place? Thus there would be an infinite regress. If that were created by another, there would then be two gods, but this cannot be true. Therefore all things in the universe are not made by God.
Again, if God is the creator, why should he practice ascetic deeds as if he were worshipping and pleasing another in order to attend to his wish? If he has to practice ascetic life to beg the other's favor, we should know God is not self-existent. Again, if God created all things, things should be determinate, in nature, at the beginning of creation and should not be chang ing. A horse is always a horse and a man is always a man. But now all things are changing according to karma. Therefore we should know that all things are not made by God. Again, if God is the maker of all things, there should be no sinfuIness and blessedness because good, evil, beauty, and ugliness are all made by God. But actually there is sinfuIness and blessedness. Therefore all things are not made by God.
Again, if all living beings come from God, they should respect and love him just as sons love their father. But actually this is not the case, some hate God and some love him. Therefore we should know that all things are not made by God. Again, if God is the maker of all things, why did he not create men all happy or all unhappy? Why did he make some happy and others unhappy? We would know that he acts out of hate and love, and hence is not self-existent. since he is not self-existent, all things are not made by him. Comment: what Nagarjuna wants to say seems to be this: God can neither be all good nor self-sufficient. If he is all good, why did he not create all men happy? If he is self-sufficient, why did he make some happy and others unhappy? Also, why does he worry about whether he should love or hate them? Since God cannot be all good or self-sufficient, the traditional God, the divine being, cannot exist.
In the next 3 paragraphs, Nagarjuna questions the belief that man's fate and salvation are made and controlled by God. He argues that the belief is empirically unjustifiable and also makes moral and religious practices impossible. Again, if God is the maker of all things, all living beings cannot have made anything. But, actually each living being has skillfully made something. Therefore, we should know that all things are not made by God. Again, if God were the maker, good, evil, suffering and happiness would come without being made by men. But this would destroy the principle of the world, that men do good and obtain reward, and do evil and receive punishment. The practice of an ascetic life and Brahmanic deeds would be in vain. But this is not the case. Therefore, we know that all things are not made by God.
Again, if God is great among sentient beings according to causal conditions, then all sentient beings who practice the karma of happiness should also be great. Why is God only honored? If God is self-existent without causal conditions, then all sentient beings should, in principle, be self-existent. But actually this is not the case. So you should know that all things are not made by God. If God has a cause and comes from another, then this other may come from still another. There will be an infinite regress. If there is an infinite regress, there can be no cause. Thus, there are various causal conditions which make things. You should know that all things are not made by God and also that God does not exist. When a person who held this heterodoxical view asked the Buddha about suffering being made by another, he did not answer.
Comment: this paragraph summarizes the discussion of the impossibility of something made or produced by other. In the following paragraphs, Nagarjuna examines the last 2 alternative views of making, made by both self and other, and made by neither, and argues that they cannot be established. It cannot be the case that something is made by both, itself and other, either, for this, as has been shown, has 2 fallacies. The combination of causal conditions produces all things, so nothing is produced from no cause. The Buddha did not answer this question either.
Question: therefore the scripture only refutes 4 wrong views and does not say that suffering is empty. Comment: this statement, supposedly made by the opponent, claims that the silence of the Buddha is only the denial of the 4 possible ways of viewing things. It does not imply that all things are empty. In the closing paragraphs, Nagarjuna insists that the silence of the Buddha is the same as the teaching of the doctrine of emptiness. He reaffirms the main teaching of the Madhyarnika, namely, that pratvyasamutpada or dependent origination is the same as sunyata. Answer: although the Buddha says a combination of causal conditions produces suffering, to refute the 4 wrong views is the same as saying suffering is empty. If suffering is produced from causal conditions, it means that suffering is empty. Why? Because anything which is produced by causal conditions has no self-nature. Anything which lacks self-nature is empty. If suffering is empty, you should know that created, non-created, and all sentient beings are empty.